Sarah Martinez had always been small for her age, but what she lacked in size, she made up for in determination. Standing barely 5 feet tall with her dark hair pulled back in regulation style, she looked even younger than her 22 years. The crisp lines of her Navy uniform told a different story, though. Each ribbon and insignia earned through countless hours of training and unwavering dedication. Walking through the crowded downtown area near the naval base, Sarah was heading to meet her family for dinner. It was her first leave in 6 months, and she couldn't wait to see her parents and younger brother. The evening air was warm, and the streets buzzed with activity as people enjoyed their Friday night out. She had chosen to wear her dress blues tonight because her father had specifically requested it. He was so proud of her service, always asking her to wear the uniform when they went out together. It made him beam with pride to walk beside his daughter, the sailor. Sarah smiled, thinking about how his chest would puff out when people thanked her for her service. As she rounded the corner toward the restaurant, she noticed a group of 5 men standing outside a bar. They were loud, clearly having been drinking for hours. Their voices carried across the street as they laughed and pushed each other around in the careless way drunk people do. Sarah kept her eyes forward and continued walking, hoping to pass by without incident. But something about the sight of her uniform seemed to trigger something in them. One of them, a tall man with a beer gut and stubbled face, pointed directly at her and said something to his friends. Sarah couldn't hear the words, but she could see their expressions change. What started as drunken laughter turned into something darker. "Hey, look what we got here," the tall man called out as she approached. "Little toy soldier, playing dress-up." Sarah kept walking, her training kicking in. "Don't engage, don't escalate. Just keep moving toward your destination." But the group had other plans. They stepped into her path, forming a semicircle that blocked her way forward. "I'm talking to you, sweetheart," the man continued, his words slurred, but his intent clear. "What's a little girl like you doing in a real soldier's uniform?" "I'm Navy, not Army," Sarah replied quietly, trying to step around them. "And I'm just trying to get to dinner with my family." This seemed to amuse them even more. Another man, shorter but stockier, laughed loudly. "Navy, even worse. What do you do? Serve coffee on some ship while the real men do the fighting?" Sarah felt her jaw clench, but she maintained her composure. She had dealt with attitudes like this before, unfortunately. Some people just couldn't accept that women served their country just as honorably as men. She had learned not to take it personally, but tonight felt different. These men seemed intent on more than just verbal harassment. "Look, I don't want any trouble," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her growing concern. "I just need to get past you." The tall man stepped closer, invading her personal space. She could smell the alcohol on his breath, mixed with cigarettes and something else unpleasant. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to play soldier. This uniform belongs to real heroes, not little girls looking for attention." His friends circled closer now, emboldened by their leader's aggression. Sarah found herself completely surrounded, with no clear path to escape. Her heart began to race, but her training kept her focused. Stay calm. Look for opportunities. Be ready to defend yourself if necessary. "You know what I think?" the stocky man said, reaching toward her uniform jacket. "I think someone's been playing dress-up with Daddy's old clothes." Sarah stepped back sharply, but there wasn't far to go. "Don't touch me," she warned, her voice carrying a new edge of authority. But they weren't listening anymore. The alcohol had made them bold, and the pack mentality had taken over. What started as cruel jokes was escalating into something much more dangerous. The tall man grabbed at her sleeve, trying to tear it. "Let's see what's under all this fake hero stuff," he sneered. Sarah twisted away from his grasp, her military training automatically engaging her defensive instincts. But she was outnumbered 5-1, and these weren't just drunk college kids. These were grown men, all significantly larger than her, and they seemed determined to humiliate her. As she struggled to break free from their circle, Sarah caught a glimpse of someone else approaching, a figure walking with purpose, though she couldn't make out details in the dim streetlight. She hoped it might be someone who would help, but she couldn't count on it. People often chose not to get involved in situations like this. The stocky man managed to grab her jacket and yanked hard. She heard the fabric tear as one of her ribbons went flying to the ground. The sound seemed to encourage the others, and suddenly all 5 men were grabbing at her uniform, laughing as they tried to destroy the symbols of her service. "Stop it!" Sarah shouted, fighting back with everything she had. But their combined weight and strength was overwhelming her defenses. Just as she began to fear the situation was spiraling completely out of control, a calm voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Gentlemen, I think you've made a mistake." The voice was quiet, almost conversational. But something about it made all 5 men freeze instantly. Sarah looked up to see a man standing just outside their circle. He was tall and lean, with short cropped hair and an easy stance that somehow conveyed both relaxation and readiness. He wore simple civilian clothes, jeans and a t-shirt, but everything about his bearings suggested military training. "This is none of your business, buddy," the tall man said, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "Keep walking." The stranger smiled, and Sarah noticed it didn't reach his eyes. Actually, when someone attacks a member of our armed forces, it becomes everyone's business. Especially mine. There was something in his tone that made the hair on Sarah's arm stand up. It wasn't a threat exactly, but it was a promise. The 5 men seemed to sense it too, because their aggressive posture began to shift into something more uncertain. "She's fine," one of them muttered. "We were just having some fun." "Fun," the stranger repeated, his eyes taking in Sarah's torn uniform and the ribbon lying on the ground. "I can see that. Tell you what. Why don't you all apologize to the petty officer here and go back to your drinks? We can forget this whole thing happened." The offer hung in the air like a lifeline. Sarah hoped they would take it. She could see in the stranger's movements and the way he held himself that he was military, probably special forces from his bearing. But even with his help, a fight against 5 drunk men could go badly for everyone involved. Unfortunately, alcohol and pride made for poor decision-making. The tall man, clearly the group's leader, puffed out his chest and took a step toward the newcomer. "And what if we don't want to apologize to this little wannabe soldier?" The stranger's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air around them. Sarah felt it, and she could see that even through their drunken haze, the 5 men sensed it too. "Then," he said quietly, "we're going to have a different kind of conversation." What happened next would be burned into Sarah's memory forever. The stranger moved with a fluid grace that seemed to defy physics. Each motion precise and economical. There was no wasted energy, no unnecessary flourishes, just devastating efficiency. The tall man, emboldened by alcohol and his size advantage, swung a wild haymaker toward the stranger's head. It never connected. In one smooth motion, the stranger stepped inside the punch, caught the man's wrist, and twisted. The big man's face went from aggressive confidence to shocked pain in an instant, as he found himself face down on the pavement, his arm twisted behind his back in what Sarah recognized as a professional restraint hold. "Stay down," the stranger advised calmly, applying just enough pressure to ensure compliance. The tall man, suddenly very sober, nodded frantically against the concrete. His 4 friends stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Their leader, who had seemed so formidable just seconds ago, was now completely helpless on the ground. The stranger hadn't even broken a sweat. "Anyone else want to continue this conversation?" he asked, his tone remaining conversational, despite having just dismantled their ringleader. The stocky man, apparently too drunk or too proud to learn from his friend's mistake, charged forward with a roar of anger. This time, the stranger's response was even more impressive. He released the tall man, sidestepped the charge, and used the attacker's momentum against him. A simple trip and guided fall sent the stocky man tumbling into a row of garbage cans with a tremendous crash. The remaining 3 men exchanged uncertain glances. The alcohol was still in their systems, but self-preservation was starting to override their liquid courage. They could see that this wasn't just someone who knew how to fight. This was a professional, someone whose training went far beyond barroom brawls and street fights. Sarah watched in amazement as the stranger positioned himself between her and the remaining attackers. He moved like water, flowing from one stance to another, always balanced and ready. She had seen skilled fighters before in her military training, but this was something else entirely. This was artistry combined with lethal efficiency. "Look, man," one of the remaining attackers said, his voice shaking slightly. "We didn't know she was with you. We were just messing around." The stranger tilted his head slightly, considering this. "She's not with me. I've never seen her before tonight, but she's wearing the uniform of the United States Navy, which means she's family. And nobody messes with family. Nobody messes with family." The simple declaration carried more weight than any threat could have. Sarah felt a surge of emotion. Not just gratitude, but recognition. This man understood something that went beyond individual relationships or personal connections. He understood the brotherhood and sisterhood of military service. The tall man was slowly getting to his feet, cradling his twisted arm. His face had gone pale, and all the aggressive bravado had drained out of him. "We're sorry," he mumbled, not meeting anyone's eyes. "We didn't mean anything by it." "You didn't mean anything," the stranger repeated, his voice carrying a dangerous edge for the first time. "You attacked a service member. You tried to destroy her uniform. You humiliated her in public. But you didn't mean anything by it." He took a step forward, and all 5 men unconsciously stepped back. "Do you have any idea what that uniform represents? Do you know what she's probably sacrificed to wear it?" The questions hung in the air, rhetorical but powerful. Sarah watched as shame began to replace aggression on the faces of her attackers. The stranger's words were hitting home in a way that physical violence alone never could. "My name is Marcus Torres," he continued, his voice still quiet but carrying complete authority. "Senior Chief Marcus Torres, United States Navy SEALs. And this young woman has earned the right to wear that uniform through dedication, training, and service to her country. The same country that gives you the freedom to get drunk and act like fools on a Friday night." The revelation that he was a Navy SEAL sent a visible shock through the group. SEALs were legendary. Even among civilians, these men had just tried to pick a fight with someone who could probably eliminate all 5 of them without breaking a sweat. "Senior Chief," Sarah said quietly, finding her voice for the first time since the confrontation began. "Thank you, but you don't have to." Marcus held up a hand, stopping her gently. "What's your rate, sailor?" "Petty Officer 2nd Class Sarah Martinez, sir." "Intelligence Specialist." He nodded with approval. "Petty Officer Martinez has been trained to gather and analyze intelligence that keeps our military operations safe and effective. She's probably saved more lives through her work than any of you will in your entire careers. And you thought it would be fun to tear up her uniform." The stocky man, who had managed to extricate himself from the garbage cans, was now covered in debris and looking thoroughly defeated. "We're really sorry," he said. And for the first time, it sounded genuine. "We were drunk and stupid." "Yes, you were," Marcus agreed. "But being drunk doesn't make you different people. It just removes your inhibitions and shows who you really are underneath." Sarah watched as the 5 men absorbed this truth. She could see the shame and regret beginning to set in as the alcohol-fueled aggression faded. They were starting to realize the magnitude of what they had done. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus continued, his tone becoming businesslike. "You're going to apologize properly to Petty Officer Martinez. You're going to pay for any damage to her uniform, and you're going to take a long look at yourselves and figure out why you thought this was acceptable behavior." The tall man, still nursing his twisted arm, nodded eagerly. "Yes, sir. Absolutely. We're really, really sorry." But Marcus wasn't finished. "More importantly, you're going to remember this night every time you see someone in uniform. You're going to remember that these men and women have chosen to serve something bigger than themselves, and you're going to treat them with the respect they've earned." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes, though she fought to keep them from falling. It wasn't just the relief of being safe, or gratitude for Marcus's intervention. It was the recognition and validation. After months of dealing with skepticism, condescension, and outright hostility from some people, here was someone who truly understood the weight of wearing the uniform. The 5 attackers were gathering themselves now, preparing to leave. Their night of fun had turned into a humiliating lesson about respect and consequences. As they shuffled away, muttering apologies and avoiding eye contact, Sarah could see that the encounter had fundamentally changed them. Marcus watched them go, his posture relaxed but alert. Only when they had disappeared around the corner did he turn his full attention to Sarah. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice gentle now that the threat had passed. Sarah shook her head, then bent down to pick up her fallen ribbon. The small piece of cloth represented months of training and achievement, and seeing it lying dirty on the concrete had been almost as painful as the physical assault. "Let me see that," Marcus said, examining her torn jacket. "This can be fixed." "The ribbon's fine too, just needs cleaning." His matter-of-fact assessment was somehow comforting. To him, this wasn't a tragedy or a defining moment. It was just a problem to be solved. Sarah found his calm confidence infectious. "I can't thank you enough," she began. But Marcus waved off her gratitude. "You don't need to thank me. We look out for each other. That's what we do." As they stood there in the aftermath of the confrontation, Sarah realized that this night had taught her something important about the nature of service and the bonds that connected those who chose to serve. She had always known intellectually that she was part of something bigger, but tonight she had felt it in a visceral way. The uniform she wore wasn't just clothing, it was a symbol of commitment, sacrifice, and honor. And there were people like Marcus Torres who understood that and would stand up to defend it, even for a complete stranger. "Where were you headed?" Marcus asked, breaking into her thoughts. "Dinner with my family," Sarah replied. "They're probably wondering where I am." Marcus checked his watch. "You're not too late. Come on, I'll walk with you. Make sure you get there safely." As they began walking toward the restaurant, Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not just for being rescued, but for being reminded why she had chosen to serve in the first place. Tonight had shown her both the worst and the best of humanity, and somehow, the best had won. Walking alongside Marcus toward the restaurant, Sarah found herself stealing glances at the man who had just changed her entire evening. In the better lighting of the main street, she could see the details she had missed during the confrontation. His face bore the subtle signs of someone who had seen combat. A small scar along his jawline, eyes that seemed to take in everything around them, and a way of moving that suggested constant readiness. "How did you know?" Sarah asked as they walked. "I mean, how did you know to help?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, as if considering how to answer. "I was walking back from dinner myself when I saw what was happening. But honestly, I would have intervened, even if you weren't military. 5 men surrounding one woman isn't acceptable under any circumstances." Sarah nodded, understanding that his response came from both military brotherhood and basic human decency. "Still, the way you handled them, that wasn't just basic training." A slight smile crossed Marcus's face. 22 years in the Navy, 15 of those with the teams. You develop certain skills along the way. The teams. Sarah knew that was SEAL talk for the Special Operations units. This man, walking beside her, had probably been on missions she could only imagine. Faced dangers that would break most people. Yet here he was, taking time to walk a junior enlisted sailor to dinner with her family. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said. "When you told them your name and rank, they completely changed. They went from aggressive to terrified in about 2 seconds. Does that happen often?" Marcus chuckled. The first truly relaxed sound she had heard from him. "The SEAL reputation tends to precede us. Most people have seen enough movies and TV shows to know we're not the guys you want to mess with. Usually, just the name is enough to defuse a situation without anyone getting hurt. Usually, tonight was actually pretty typical. Drunk guys with more pride than sense, picking on someone they thought couldn't fight back. They're not really bad people. Just people making bad choices. Once they sobered up a little and realized the potential consequences of their actions, they backed down. Sarah considered this perspective. It was generous, probably more generous than the 5 men deserved, but she could see the wisdom in it. De-escalation was always preferable to violence, even when you had the skills to handle the violence. They were approaching the restaurant now, and Sarah could see her family through the large windows. Her father, a stocky man with graying temples, was checking his watch and looking toward the door. Her mother, petite like Sarah but with laugh lines around her eyes, was chatting with Sarah's younger brother Miguel, who was home from college for the weekend. "That's them," Sarah said, pointing toward the table. "They're probably wondering what happened to me." Marcus followed her gaze and smiled. "Your father's military? Retired Marine. 26 years. He's the reason I enlisted. Good man, I can tell from here. He's got that bearing we never really lose." Sarah looked at her father with new eyes, seeing what Marcus saw. Even sitting at a dinner table, her dad maintained the straight posture and alert awareness of a lifetime military man. She had grown up thinking that was just how fathers were supposed to be. "Would you like to meet them?" Sarah asked impulsively. "I know my dad would want to thank you personally." Marcus hesitated. "I don't want to intrude on your family time." "Please," Sarah insisted. "After what you did tonight, you're practically family anyway." Something in her tone must have convinced him, because Marcus nodded. "All right, but just for a moment." As they entered the restaurant, Sarah's father stood immediately, his eyes taking in her slightly disheveled appearance and the tear in her jacket. His expression shifted to concern and then to protective anger as he processed what he was seeing. "Mija, what happened?" he asked, using the Spanish endearment he had called her since childhood. "Dad, this is Senior Chief Marcus Torres, Navy SEALs. He helped me out of a difficult situation tonight." Her father's entire demeanor changed as he registered the introduction. Military protocol kicked in as he extended his hand to Marcus. "Sergeant Major Roberto Martinez, Marine Corps, retired. Thank you for whatever you did for my daughter." Marcus accepted the handshake with equal formality. "Your daughter handled herself with honor, Sergeant Major. She's a credit to her service and her family." Sarah's mother had risen from the table now, her maternal instincts picking up on the undercurrents of the conversation. "Sarah, sweetheart, are you hurt?" "I'm fine, Mom," Sarah assured her quickly. Senior Chief Torres made sure of that. Miguel, meanwhile, was staring at Marcus with the wide-eyed admiration of a 19-year-old who had grown up on action movies. "You're really a Navy SEAL?" he asked. Marcus smiled at the young man's enthusiasm. "Guilty as charged." "What happened exactly?" Sarah's father asked, his voice taking on the tone of a man who needed to know the full story. Sarah gave them a condensed version of the events, watching as her father's jaw tightened with each detail. By the time she finished, his hands were clenched into fists on the table. "5 of them," he said quietly, the words carrying a dangerous edge. "It's handled, Dad," Sarah said quickly. Marcus nodded. "They won't be bothering anyone else in uniform. I made that very clear." Sarah's father studied Marcus for a long moment, professional soldier to professional soldier. Whatever he saw there satisfied him, because some of the tension left his shoulders. "Join us for dinner," Sarah's mother said suddenly. "Please. It's the least we can do." Marcus started to decline, but Sarah's father cut him off. "She's right. I insist. Any man who looks out for my daughter like that is welcome at our table." The invitation was clearly not optional, delivered with the authority of a career military man who was used to being obeyed. Marcus seemed to recognize this and nodded gracefully. "Thank you. I'd be honored." As they settled around the table, Sarah watched her family interact with Marcus and felt a profound sense of completeness. Here were the people who mattered most to her, sharing space with the man who had stood up for everything the uniform represented. The conversation that followed was unlike anything Sarah had expected. Marcus and her father swapped stories from their respective services, finding common ground in shared experiences of deployment, leadership challenges, and the unique bonds formed in military service. Her mother, a teacher by profession, drew Marcus out about his post-service plans and his thoughts on transitioning back to civilian life. Miguel peppered Marcus with questions about SEAL training and operations, though Marcus skillfully deflected anything too sensitive, while still satisfying the young man's curiosity. Sarah found herself laughing more than she had in months, watching her family embrace this stranger, who had become a hero in the span of a single evening. "You know," her father said during a lull in the conversation. Sarah almost didn't enlist. She was worried about being too small, about people not taking her seriously. "Dad," Sarah protested, embarrassed. "No. Let me finish," he continued. "I told her that size doesn't matter if you have heart and intelligence. But I worried too. I worried about situations exactly like tonight." He turned to Marcus, his expression serious. "Knowing there are people like you out there, people who understand what that uniform means and will stand up for it, that gives an old Marine father some peace of mind." Marcus met his gaze steadily. "She handled herself well tonight. You raised a strong daughter, Sergeant Major. The Navy is lucky to have her." As the evening wound down, Sarah realized that what had started as one of the worst nights of her military career had somehow transformed into one of the most meaningful. The attack on her uniform had been traumatic, but Marcus's intervention had been about more than just physical rescue. He had validated her service, defended her honor, and reminded her why she had chosen this path in the first place. When they finally prepared to leave, Marcus shook hands with each family member. Sarah's father held the grip longer than necessary, conveying without words his gratitude and respect. "Senior Chief," he said formally, "if you're ever in the area again, our door is always open." "Thank you, sir. That means a great deal." As they walked outside together, Sarah turned to Marcus one last time. "I still don't know how to thank you properly for what you did tonight." Marcus stopped walking and looked at her seriously. "Keep wearing that uniform with pride. Keep serving with honor. Show people like those men tonight what a real sailor looks like. That's all the thanks I need." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility and privilege that came with military service. "I will." "And Sarah?" Marcus added, as he prepared to leave. "Next time someone questions your right to wear that uniform, remember tonight. Remember that you're not alone out there. We're all part of something bigger than ourselves." As Marcus disappeared into the night, Sarah stood outside the restaurant with her family, feeling fundamentally changed by the evening's events. The torn ribbon in her pocket would be mended, the jacket would be repaired, but the lesson of the night would stay with her forever. She was part of a brotherhood and sisterhood that transcended individual differences. She wore a uniform that represented the highest ideals of service and sacrifice. And there were people like Marcus Torres who understood that and would stand up to defend it, no matter the circumstances. Walking to her car surrounded by her family, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose and pride. Tomorrow she would return to her duties with a deeper understanding of what her service meant, not just to herself, but to everyone who believed in the principles she had sworn to defend. The wrong people had chosen to challenge her tonight, but in doing so, they had inadvertently given her one of the most valuable lessons of her military career. She was exactly where she belonged, wearing exactly the uniform she had earned the right to wear.